Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me for this Constitution Day lecture. It's particularly nice that the series is called We the People, because that is also the name of India's longest running television show that I was the host of for 16, actually close to 17 years. Talking about television, about 4.5 years ago, thereabouts, when I decided to break my relationship with television news and go digital, a lot of people thought that I was absolutely crazy. My friends, my family, they said, how can you just give up the security of a good job? It's a good channel. And I had that restless, middle-aged sort of anxiety that things were going to change. I just had an instinct. Things had already started changing. And I could feel the sort of dullness of television news eating into my soul. And I'd also done it for by that time, about 23 odd years. And I felt like it was a now or never moment for me, because I had a sense, and I knew it was a risk, that technology, the polarized environment, changing consumption patterns, how young people respond or don't respond, in fact, to news, all of this was going to turn our world topsy-turvy. And indeed, that's exactly what happened. And while I have taken many impetuous decisions in my life that I have come to regret, leaving television news is not one of them. I have been able to forge my own path. Strangely, the most challenging years of our life gave me that opportunity, which was the pandemic. I had just launched Mojo's story. Mojo means magic, and I had set out to reclaim the magic, in my mind, of journalism. And as I announced my venture, the pandemic literally hit 2 months later. And I got into a car and I drove the length and breadth of the country. I walked with migrant workers. I reported from slums, from ICUs, from the banks of the Ganga where bodies had been abandoned without counting. And I remembered why I had become a journalist, which I think I had in the interim forgotten. And I think because so many of us actually forgot why we became journalists, that we are today in a position where, as was said in the introduction, trust in media has ebbed to a point like never before. This, by the way, is not true only for India. This is a global phenomenon. But what I'm going to say here today, because I've been asked to talk about the fate of media, not just the future, but also the present and the past. How did we get to this point? And what might be the shape and form of solutions? What I really want to do, because I'm not an academic or a lawyer or a technical expert, is to speak as a practitioner, is to speak as a citizen. And then, since we do have a full hall here, I think it would be in the fairness and fitness of things if I heard from you, if I took your questions. Nothing's off limits. Feel free to ask me anything you want to. So that's how we're going to structure, I think, the next hour or so that we're going to spend together. So let's start by someone telling me how many news channels you think there are in India. Wild guess. 400. Who said 400? I mean, that's like bang on. Like, how do you know? Was that an educated guess, or did you Google it before this talk? So there are 390 news channels and 3,700 digital news publishers in India today, right? And yet, we are in a position where we have to ask ourselves whether the media as we understand it, or the media as we knew it, or the media as we understand the word, is at a near extinction point. And by the way, this is, I was in the United States of America doing a similar talk, and there was talk of media actually going extinct. That people are just going to consume TikTok and Instagram, and there is soon going to be no mediated journalism in the way that we understand it. Now, India is an outlier because here even the newspaper industry seems to thrive. Newspapers continue to be published while they're going out of print in other parts of the world. Digital platforms, as already said, 3,700 of them are proliferating, and there are close to 400 news channels. And yet, because it's Constitution Day, you might wonder, is my freedom as a journalist protected under the Constitution? What do you think the answer is? Okay, who said no? Someone said no. Could you tell me why you think it's not? And then other people said it's yes. And the answer is a kind of strange in-between. So like you, I too, as a journalist, have the right to the freedom of expression under Article 19. And that is all. There is actually nothing called the freedom of press or the freedom of media in our Constitution. Let's say, unlike the United States, where there's the First Amendment, and free speech is really a kind of enshrined core value of the American nation state, and the liberty of the US press is specifically mentioned in the US Constitution. Now, the freedom of the media is not mentioned. This phrase does not exist in the Constitution. There are obviously Supreme Court judgments that have interpreted it in different ways, but effectively, your freedom to express yourself is absolutely identical to my freedom to express myself. And that, to my mind, in itself is a problem, because those of us who build organizations bases our expression are more likely to be sued for defamation, taken to court, and restricted under the very same Constitution by what the Constitution calls reasonable restrictions. But the language that actually defines those reasonable restrictions is so open-ended. National security and sovereignty of the state, I understand. But it also includes criteria like freedom of expression can be restricted if it interferes with public order, morality, incitement. These are very subjective nomenclatures, and therefore there is, I would argue, no ironclad protection of a free press specifically in the Constitution. But if we agree that a free press is central or essential to the upholding of constitutional values, and I think we do agree with that, or at least we were brought up to believe that a free press is the bedrock of democracy, it's the fourth pillar, a fair and free and fearless media is essential if we want to protect constitutional values of equality, justice, and fraternity. If we agree that a free press is needed for that, then we also have to agree that the reason that our press is not fully free isn't only because of politicians. Politicians are a big part of it, because no politician I have met from any party actually likes a free press. They may disagree in differ in degree, and they may all platitudinally talk about a free press. But there isn't a public figure I have met who has responded well to criticism. I have had the most quote-unquote liberal politicians not talk to me for years because of an interview I may have done. Not even an opinion piece, but an interview I have done that has got them consequences that they had not signed up for. So there might be a difference of degree between governments and politicians, but I essentially believe that no politician is actually interested in or invested in a free press. But it is simple-minded, and that is the essence of my argument in this talk today. It is simple-minded to think that the curbs on a free media come only from governments. And I'm saying governments because we've had the emergency, then we've had Rajiv Gandhi attempt to bring in a broadcast bill, we've had an adversarial relationship between the BJP and the media. At state governments level, we have an adversarial relationship between state governments and the local press, even if not with the national press. But yet it is simple-minded to think, oh, if tomorrow you manage to convince the political class to be more liberal, the media would suddenly become much more free than it is. I like to say that the Indian media has witnessed 3 tyrannies. I use the word loosely, I don't mean it literally, but we have been through 3 tyrannies. I'm old enough to have started my journalism when there was no private news channel in India. None. Can you even, is anyone here old enough to remember that time? What, do you look back at that time with nostalgia now? So I remember doing my first master's and graduating from Jamia Millia Islamia, and only that was the only place you could literally get a mass comm degree in at that point. And they would only take 30 people from all across India. And I had trained to be a film and television producer. There was no news channel to join. My mother had been a journalist, but I thought I'd be a lawyer. And then I thought I'd make movies. And so I trained to be a movie maker. And, you know, news TV didn't exist in India, so it wasn't really an option for me. And at that time, Doordarshan, which was the public broadcaster, kind of responded to the slow, very slow winds of change and decided to commission 2 production houses, NDTV and India Today, to produce a 30-minute bulletin in English and Hindi each that was privately produced. But every script that had to be submitted, pre-submitted to a bureaucrat in the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting before you were allowed to broadcast it. And sometimes you ran into the most bizarre sort of debates with bureaucrats. I hope the bureaucrats in this room will forgive me, but it really was quite bizarre because, for example, before Jammu and Kashmir special status was abrogated, Jammu and Kashmir historically had its own flag, for instance. And so if I would do a story and I reported many years of my life from Kashmir and say Jammu and Kashmir, this is Jammu and Kashmir's flag, the vetting officer in the Information and Broadcasting Ministry would actually strike that out and say, you can't say Jammu and Kashmir has its own flag. And I would say, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. And it would make no difference. So I have seen those years. I have seen those years when it was the tyranny of the state. I say the state because it didn't matter which the government was. The media was simply owned by government. Right? And so, as private news started being produced, it wasn't like this free 30 minutes. You were pre-screened for everything that you said. And only when they approved your script were you allowed to go on the air with that script. So that was the tyranny of the state. Then as private news proliferated, came the tyranny of the market. The tyranny of the market, the cliche about media, when we think about media, the 3-letter word that we think of is TRP. And we started being called these TRP chasers, and I always say to people that I meet that you don't actually understand that the TRP is all of you. The TRP is a television rating point, and there's this very flawed way of measuring how many people were watching your show. So there were people who would rig the system and they would, let's say, leave their TV set on all day. Or you could manipulate it in other ways. And so you had now suddenly this flood of news channels and everybody was claiming to be number one. Now I don't watch TV, but I believe that's still the case. So that is the tyranny of the market. So what would happen is advertisers would then turn around and say, we can't give you money or we can't sponsor your show. Now remember, we have moved from the tyranny of the state, where there is a bureaucrat checking what you're saying, to now nobody's checking what you're saying except your editors. But the commercial pressure is so enormous that you're feeling like you need to modulate your content so that more people watch you. So already there's pressure on you to be massy or to perform for the gallery or to play to the lowest common denominator, because otherwise your marketing guys are telling you that your show isn't getting ratings, your show isn't getting eyeballs, so we aren't getting sponsors. So tyranny of the state, tyranny of the market, and we are now living in the tyranny of the algorithm. Yes, I feel much freer today as a digital journalist with columns in print than I did towards the last few years of my life as a television journalist. But the tyranny of the algorithm is a very real thing, and it's a very, I think it's an undertold story. Because a lot of people just imagine that, these big tech platforms are free. But what actually happens when you practice on them is you can see how many people are watching you in real time. And let me tell you that you have to be an especially strong human being to not respond or not care about that, right? You can see, suppose something you really feel strongly about, nobody's watching it. And it is, maybe not for me because I've now been doing this for 30 years, but I've seen young journalists simply get paralyzed saying, nobody's watching this. Then there is the dimension of social media, Twitter, now called X, Instagram, TikTok is banned, but in other countries, TikTok, where I have seen people, let's say, express an opinion, and then they'll get trolled. And trolling is a very organized thing. It's, you know, and so groups of ideologues will hire bots who are not even real people, who will then come after you for your opinion. And I have seen young people change their commentary just because they don't want to get trolled, or they simply go silent and they say, I'll just be quiet. Yeah? So please understand that this age of technology that we live in, there are many good things that have come from it, and I will talk about them. But technology comes with its own tyrannies. And one of the tyrannies that it comes with is that the internet is a very, very polarized place. The internet responds well to bias. Now, those of us who are of a certain vintage, who were taught all our lives that your job was to be facts-oriented, not opinion-oriented. Your job was not to display your political affiliation. You had to do your work, and your work had to speak for you. You didn't have to speak for yourself. That's my training, right? Now, I made my motto at the Mojo Story. I'll say it in Hindi and then I'll translate it. Na chamcha, na morcha. We are neither sycophants nor activists. We are simply a big tent space to engage with all stakeholders of our country. We hope without fear or bias. We do the best we can. But I will tell you that it is such a polarizing environment to be a journalist in, that if tomorrow I confirm your pre-held opinion, you will like me. And the day I say something that you don't agree with, you're going to call me biased. And we literally go through this every day. You train yourself to not read the comments section. You train yourself to not read the comments after you post a tweet, or you do a post on Instagram, or you do a show on YouTube, or you write an article on your website. Because the volley of instant feedback, while in a way a democratization of the space, and it has rightfully, I think, challenged media as a one-way street, has come with other dangers. And those dangers are the human tendency or the human weakness that journalists now want to be popular, right? And I always say that if you're seeking approval, if you haven't pissed anybody off with what you've said, you are a bad journalist, right? Then you are in public relations. I have all respect for public relations. I use them too when I need to. But I am not a PR person. I have to have irritated somebody with what I've said, hopefully today as well. Because that was our job. Our job, in my understanding, was to make somebody somewhere uncomfortable, or bring forward something that isn't being told. What is happening in Manipur? Why is nobody telling that story? Let's go to Manipur and tell that story. And I did. And even in Manipur, there was polarization. There was the Kuki community saying you're biased. There was the Methi community saying biased. Everybody saying you're biased. That's okay. That's okay. You're making everybody a little angry. That's okay. But you have to understand that it runs counter to human nature. Human beings want to be liked. Journalists are no different. Right? And for journalists, it becomes an even more heady sort of addiction. Because you're in the public space, you can get adulation. Criticism is tough because the criticism is also public. So you need to be a very, very inordinately self-assured and confident person to not care. The trick is to not take praise seriously or criticism seriously. The problem is that people tend to do one of either or both. Either they'll love the praise and dismiss the criticism, or they'll take both very seriously. Both are a problem. Because we're not actually here to perform for other people. We're here to be true to ourselves. But to come back to what technology is doing, and I'll come to the good parts also. There's a lot of good things technology has done for us. Otherwise, many of us, these 3,700 digital news publishers, would not exist today. But what technology has done, and I feel like we're caught in this vicious cycle of polarization. Like, you don't know whether the media made politics polarized or the politics is polarized, so the media is expected to be in camps. So, you know, today you're asked, are you left-wing or right-wing, left-wing or right-wing? And you want to say, I'm just like, I want wings to fly. I don't want to be in any wing. I just want to be free. But it is so offensive to people because our polity is so polarized today. You know, relationships are breaking down over how we vote, who we like. Family WhatsApp groups are on fire basis political disagreements. You've all been there, right? Raise your hand if you've had a fight in your family WhatsApp group over politics. I mean, you're not being honest. It can't be just 10 people. Come on. Come on, it has to be literally everybody, right? It has to be each one of us. And I kind of long for the time, as a child, I remember growing up in this sort of, my father's family had migrated from Pakistan, and we grew up in this refugee colony in Delhi where we'd been given small plots of land, and it was a very mixed sort of neighborhood with very different politics. And everybody had a different way of thinking, but everybody had originally been a refugee. And I would have all these arguments with people, and then at the end of it, they would say, okay, now leave it, no, eat a samosa and go. And I always say that spirit of our public discourse, that you can end a debate by saying, okay, have a drink, have a cup of coffee, eat a samosa and go, that is dying. And to some extent, it is no longer possible to tell whether the media created that polarization by literally reinforcing differences. I mean, during COVID, I know that there were news channels that showed the skull cap, a skull cap, to put inaccurate data of Muslims spitting from windows, something that never happened. And it was just so offensive, right? It was so offensive that, so you can argue that the media has picked up the fault lines and made them wider, or you could argue that the politics has polarized us, the environment is like that, the world is like that, we're at odds with each other like never before, and the media is merely playing to the market. Most of the media, so many people tell me this every day, why aren't you this way or that way? And I said, because as a human being, I'm not this way or that way. On issues, I may have an opinion, but I don't see any reason for my viewer to know who I vote for. You should not know who I vote for. That's my private preference as a citizen. My work should simply be the most honest work that it can be. But what is happening instead of this? We are in echo chamber. When I say we, right now I mean the media. This has happened in the US. Nobody saw how Trump performed coming. This has happened just now in Maharashtra. Nobody in the media saw it coming. Every instant punditry that has come from the media from New York to New Delhi has been wrong. So you have to ask yourself, why are we getting it wrong? And we're getting it wrong because we are in this quicksand of polarization, and we are getting pulled in it partly because of maybe bias, but also partly because we think that the market wants an extreme position. And to go back to the original argument at the opening of my talk, politics is one part of what makes the media unfree. These three tyrannies that India's media has gone through, the state, the market, and now living the algorithm, they all tie up to the largest problem of all, which is the broken revenue model of news. Everybody has an opinion on journalists. Nobody wants to pay for news. And if nobody wants to pay for news, please ask yourselves what happens then. What happens next is that, especially television, which was my home for more than 2 decades, it is very expensive to run. Television hasn't kept pace with how fast technology is changing. COVID showed us, when I was out on the road, I didn't actually see colleagues from big broadcast channels. I saw reporters from regional newspapers, from small towns, from villages, barely earning anything, out there pounding the pavement, where most of the big guys chose to stay back. They had all the resources, all the money. But guess what? Technology made it possible to create a level playing field between the big guys with their big resources and somebody like me who traveled with 3 people, including my driver, and got more impact, more views, more everything, just because you didn't need those big satellite dishes anymore, and you didn't need those big vans. You needed just a good internet connection and a phone with a good camera and a good mic. Literally, that's all you needed. So technology has, while flattening us and flattening our minds to some degree, has also created survival routes for those who don't want to be owned by the sort of, the staleness, the bias, and not to be consumed by the sort of dying embers of television news. But to come back to what's happening, the money. We never talk about money when we talk about a free press. We talk about esoteric ideas like, what does our constitution say? What do governments say? Please, let's talk about money. Because without money, there is no freedom. Women know in relationships that they don't leave because they're not economically independent. Without money, there is no freedom. It's just as true for media. So what is happening in big media organizations? Their revenue models are broken, news isn't making money, so big business houses step in, corporate houses step in. All of India's TV news channels are owned by big business houses, all. I actually have no judgment of this because I think it's inevitable. Because if you don't have money, how are they going to run? They'll close. They'll simply close because the revenue model is just so completely broken. And what then happens is, because unfortunately, we still live in a political context where business houses need governments on their side to get their licenses, their approvals, their clearances. You have then created a series of conflicts of interest, right? Because business by definition is going to tell the media house that it has, be careful, pipe down, don't say this, make so-and-so happy. I've got a factory coming there, I've got a project coming here, and it links back. You see, everything interconnects. Till you have an environment where license Raj hasn't completely gone, business people are also scared. They're scared. They're scared of not getting a project. They're scared of a court case. They're scared of a notice. So they are the most conservative when it comes to media. Most conservative, right? But if the revenue model is broken, what else is going to happen but the corporatization of media? It is a natural flow. Which brings me to we the people. I think one of the most disconcerting things for me as a journalist has been the selectiveness with which this bias has now begun to impact the issues that people pick up, right? So I think Rajni is here somewhere. Where's Rajni? So Rajni is a doctor whom I got to know mostly through social media during COVID. And she would come on my shows and we would talk about COVID. And then we lost touch a bit. And then the rape and murder of a young doctor took place in Calcutta. And she sent me a message on my Twitter DM, direct message, saying, this has happened, do you think you could pick it up? And I said, absolutely. Like, it was no questions asked. I didn't care who was going to watch it. I didn't care whether it was going to get me money. I didn't care if it was going to get me into trouble. I didn't care. I just did it like within hours the next day. We asked her, will you speak? She said, no, I'm not in Calcutta. I'll give you the name of somebody. We got that somebody. And so began our very relentless coverage, to the extent that I had a police notice from the Calcutta police by the end of it for something that I hadn't done. And, well, they didn't follow it through. I was very combative, and it ended there. But I remember telling my team that evening that we don't care about some issues. You can't care. Of course you want people to watch. You want people to watch because you're in the business of communication. If you're trying to make an impact and create awareness, you want people to watch. You don't want to live in an ivory tower where nobody watches your work. But there are certain things you do from conviction. You just do them from conviction and you let the views come. And I was shocked to see there were colleagues who didn't pick up that story. I'm using the word story loosely. A young woman was killed at her place of work. And there were young doctors on protest for the next more than a month. And it was such a scandal because the principal, because the parents had been lied to about how the daughter had died. The principal on whose watch this happened was not transferred out. He was in fact protected and given another job at another medical college. When the students there protested, politicians landed up to try and help him keep his job. And there are many wheels within wheels. Finally, the Supreme Court took notice of it. Now, I bring this up, to say technology also does this. Technology also allows you to make a connection online, to share information online, to mobilize very quickly, to mobilize very inexpensively, and to have a huge impact without the fetters of any corporate house telling you what to do, right? So that's the good side of technology. The dangerous side of technology is instant judgment of your viewer. You have to be very strong to not pay attention to it. And instant viewership metrics, which can be very disconcerting. And the way we chose to deal with it is by saying, of course we're going to need to do some things for revenue and some things for views, but we have to have a bucket where we do some things from conviction. But that conviction can't be selective. And as hideously compromised as I think Indian TV news is today, I'm afraid the counter to it has not been journalistic. The counter to it has been political activism. That is not journalism. You cannot replace one set of biases with another set of biases and call it journalism. You cannot say, oh, the TV news is pro so-and-so party, so the YouTube space will be anti so-and-so party, and neither is journalistic in my opinion. Our job as a journalist is simply that if RG Code happens, if a young woman is raped and killed in Calcutta, you do that story. If Bilkis Bano in Gujarat has her rapist walking out to sweets and garlands, you do that story. And your doing that cannot be determined by which state government you prefer. It just simply cannot be, because that is not journalism. And yet we see more and more and more and more selectiveness in the selection of the issues that people focus on. And finally, I implore all of you to not discount your own role in this. More galling than bias, more galling than even hate-mongering, because people can see hate-mongering for what it is this: we live in an age where we are literally told to dumb ourselves down. We, the practitioners. Now, I am all for a lesson I learned at my journalism school at Columbia University, where my teacher used to tell me, write like you speak, only better. Research deeply, but tell it simply. I agree with that. But I don't agree that, oh, don't pick that up because, who's going to be interested in that? Nobody's interested in that. No, nobody's interested in what's actually happening, I don't know, in Russia, Ukraine. Nobody's actually interested in what's happening with I agree that you have to find accessible ways of communication. But to be told that it's the age of influencers, it's the age of people who are today watched because what are they known for? They're known for being known. We literally live in a celebrity-washed paparazzi culture where how many people follow you on a social media platform determines how many people are listening to you. And those people may never step out, and this could be, by the way, on the right or the left of spectrum. They may never step out of the cocoons of their studio. And there will be other people, and forget me, I come from privilege. I have seen young stringers in the smallest towns of this country beg a media organization for an identity card because they have a dream that they have a phone and they can be some kind of journalist. And the repercussions for them when they displease somebody, right? Nobody stands up for them because they're not on the rolls of any, they're not full-time employees of any place. They're doing the bravest journalism. And all the big networks today, unwilling to spend money because revenue models are broken, are getting content from these people and are unwilling to protect them. And those people are not called journalists, but somebody opining from their drawing room in a over-provocative way or an over-dramatized way. News is theater. It started with television and it's made its way into social media platforms. And those people get 10x the views that those of us who are a little more nuanced. Nuance has become a bad word. Nuance has become a word that is used interchangeably with boring. Now, I agree that it is incumbent on us to not be boring. I think there's no excuse for being boring. But I don't think I'm boring. And I don't think I have to surrender my complexity. I don't want to make myself dumb, but I am expected to make myself dumb. Because we live in a very different age, and that's the reality. And finally, something we haven't even spoken about, artificial intelligence. It's coming. It is almost impossible to tell what's real and what's AI generated. There are deep fakes. There are people who can impersonate you. You don't now need to come in front of a camera. You can have an AI avatar of yourself talking. What all of this is going to do, technology is going to do some great things. So on the plus side, it means that you don't need a big business house today to have a platform. On the negative side, it means that there's going to be less and less boots on the ground reporting, and more of the studio-driven, opinion-driven, cheap, on-the-go opinion making, as extreme as possible to get views. And the great, he was on the left, but he's a great thinker, Noam Chomsky. He had this famous line about media where he said that the media, he said it in the context of American media, he said the media manufactures consent. He said it in their own context, that where there is no consent, they manufacture consent. I say in India, the media manufactures dissent. The media actually plays to extremes. The internet plays to extremes. And you would think that people just hate each other because they have different opinions, because that's the kind of larger polarized environment of extremity that we now operate in. So I guess what I'm saying in conclusion is there are all of these barriers to our freedom. And I'll recap them. The Constitution doesn't specifically give us the protection that you might think we get. The restrictions in the Constitution are very generally worded and open to very easy manipulation if somebody wants to send you a notice and draw you in court. I have close lawyer friends who always tell me, stay out of court, just take that story down, because they know that I will end up in court for years. And right now I'm not paying them because they're my friends. But can you imagine people who have to pay their lawyers? Right? Many lawyers in this room, so you know what I mean. So the Constitution doesn't protect us. The Constitution's restrictions described as reasonable are actually very open-ended. Politicians do not want a free press. But that free press would have still been possible were it not for the tyranny of the market and now the tyranny of the algorithm. But above all, technology is pulling the rug from under our feet. It's changing everything that we thought we understand about media, and broken revenue models and the refusal of you as consumers to really pay for media that you care about, because actually you don't care about media, and that's the truth. That is causing more and more big business houses to enter media, and their entry into media means they bring their business interests with it, and their business interests will always be pro-establishment. It doesn't matter who the establishment is. The answer, unfortunately, to all of this by some people has been counter-polarization, counter-extremity, which I don't think is the answer, because it's a non-journalistic answer. What is the future? The truth is, I don't know. There is hope in the fact that somebody like me did not bring in a single outside investor into my company, and I have been, in my small way, with 20 people, profitable since we started, just by doing what I believe in. And it would not have been possible had technology not become so inexpensive today that you can actually do professionally produced content. And I'm not talking about like Zoom calls. Like if you go onto the Mojo story, you will see it has graphics, it has live streams, it has everything that you could get from a television, probably 1,000 times better in my opinion. That's on the plus side. Technology helps you connect today, you can source information much more easily. I mean, I grew up in an age where I remember I was in Kashmir, and I was covering a rally, and there was somebody at the podium, a separatist who had just decided to engage in dialogue with Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was the prime minister then. And in front of me, he got shot. Like somebody got up from the rally and took a gun and shot him. Like I was just standing there, and my camera person was so paralyzed, I had to shake him to actually get that. And he was dead on the spot. It happened in front of our eyes. And there was me and a colleague of mine from India Today, and there were no mobile phones because mobile phones were blocked in Jammu and Kashmir. I covered the Kargil war without a single phone, right? So we have grown up in that age. And I remember we raced and pushed and shoved each other to the only phone booth that there was to make that phone call, to call our news headquarters and say, this is what's happened. Today you don't have to do any of that. The phone works in most places unless the internet is shut. Even then there are ways around it. You can source information and deliver information and find people to speak and connect people in literally the snap of a finger. So, and high-end technology is very inexpensive, so barriers to entry are very low. That's all the good stuff. The scary stuff is we simply don't know what's coming. And when you join the dots between no money, polarized politics, internet's love for bias, the audience seeking confirmation bias, and the audience not really that interested in news, not really wanting to spend money on news because anyway everything on the internet should be free. And anyway, a Reuters study now tells us that most Indians get their content from either YouTube or WhatsApp. You have to pause and wonder what's coming next. And my honest answer would be, I simply have no idea. Thank you.
I have a few questions, but I think before I go there, I will ask the audience to pitch in, and then if the questions that I had in mind are not covered, then I'll come back to you with those questions.
You are a polite moderator who will never get a job on Indian TV.
That's why I'm a lawyer. Waiting for journalists to come and brief me when they get into trouble. Okay, so what I will do is I will take 3 questions at a time. And then we have about half an hour or so. So we probably can get about 10 questions, hopefully. So I'll take 3 questions at a time. I'll be very selective, completely judgmental, keeping in mind the need to get all sorts of opinions and gender, age, all of that, okay? So we'll start with the lady there first. Yeah, the black one first there, and then I'll come to you, sir, here in the blue shirt, and then I'll come there. 3 questions, and then I'll come back in the next round. Okay? Yeah, please.
Baka, hi, Shuchi here.
Hi.
I've been a journalist all my life, 18 years. You're one of the reasons why I wanted to be a journalist. So now I teach journalism at the National School of Journalism. And I have young students here, and I teach a broadcast module to them. Yes. So who better than to bring them all the way here? My campus is in Bangalore. So my question to you is, what kind of newsrooms can they expect now, given how divisive and how polarized newsrooms are? And what kind of job orientation and what kind of mental orientation should they have before they walk into newsrooms, especially broadcast newsrooms?
You want to take one by one, or should you go?
However
Go for it.
I'll respond quickly to that. Well, thank you. I'm glad somebody is still trying to motivate young people into joining journalism. It's tough to motivate young people in this environment, and we should acknowledge that journalism schools are closing down. I was just talking to your colleague who said that there are 2 that have shut down in this very city. So that's how serious things are. I would always say that despite everything I just said, I actually love what I do. Like, people think I'm absolutely crazy. You know, we had a big women's festival that we do in Mumbai called We the Women, and I was on stage for 13 hours, and the next morning was Maharashtra elections. I hadn't slept for 4 days, and I set an alarm. I slept at 1 in the morning. I was up at 6 in the morning sitting doing Maharashtra elections. And a couple of my friends who are not from the media said, "You're crazy." And I said, well, I love what I do. And I think it's very important to understand that media, with all its faults, I believe remains a passion profession. If you don't instinctively love telling a story, bringing information to people, unraveling a jigsaw puzzle, going to a difficult place, a conflict zone, if you're not willing to go long hours without sleep or food, if you're not willing to do those things, it's not a structured life. Please let us not pretend that being a journalist is a structured life. The abiding mistake of my life is that Benazir Bhutto got assassinated in Pakistan, and for once in my life, my phone ringer was off, and I missed that. I've never had a ringer off since then. Like, it doesn't matter what time of night it is. I know that news can happen at any time. So all I will say to young people is, newsrooms may be corroded, but you first have to examine, do you love this, or are you doing it because you want your face on camera? Because if you're doing it to get your face on camera, trust me, it looks glamorous from afar. It is a non-glamorous profession in the truest sense of the word, right? So my only sort of urging to young people would be curious, ask questions, be the authentic version of yourself and reflect deeply on whether this is something you think you could love. If you want a very orderly life, a very predictable life, a life where you don't have to deal with other people's opinion of you, then journalism is not for you. Thank you.
The media theorist Neil Postman argued that when television entered news,
Yes.
one was using the same device for news and entertainment.
Yes.
And that led to a dumbing down of news because news had to become entertainment to compete. Now, in that sense, it's got worse because the digital device is designed for short attention span entertainment.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what's your view on this dilemma that Postman identifies?
Yeah. I think it's not the medium. I think we can control what happens to media. But when I say we, I don't mean now me as a practitioner, but I think we as people we make or break what succeeds. And I think to cede that power is the saddest thing. Like, I find what is sad is the disinterest that most people feel in news content. And everybody has an opinion, mostly not complimentary. And I understand that. I would also be a cynic in your position. I'm a cynic in my own position. But I still believe we have the power. I'm still doing the journalism I believe in. I may not be growing rapidly at X pace. Tomorrow, if I either criticized or praised any particular politician, this side or that side, my numbers would grow like this. If I just came on camera every day and either abused a politician or praised him or her, because people respond to their own bias. People come with their biases and they want reaffirmation of their biases. But I do not agree that it's the medium. I think it's the culture that we've created and we're all complicit in it. You know, when I was in television, a lot of my colleagues had come from newspapers and they would say this. They would say, oh, TVs. And I am a first generation broadcast journalist. And TV was magical. It was magical in what it could do. It was magical in the images that it could bring. It was magical in the power of the storytelling. But it had to be used in that way. And what gives me hope, sir, is that yes, shrinking attention spans is a fact. But there's also long podcasts that are working. There is an audience. It may not be, again, a mass audience. Maybe the future is in being niche. But I find that two kinds of contents are working today in the digital world. Very short and very in-depth. What's not working is slightly on the surface, for the heck of it, done like, 15 minutes, somebody droning on with nothing. So I don't think it's the medium, I think it's what you do with the medium.
Right. So, the young lady here with the glasses, yes. I have to look back, sir. I'll come back, if... Yeah, and the person right behind her after yeah, that's two. I will come back to that.
Thank you so much. My question is, hi, my name is Sam.
Hi.
My question is concerning your own revenue model, because you mentioned that you've been profitable from fairly early on without outside investment. How have you made your revenue model work for the work that you do?
By doing things outside of news that are in the content space, that subsidize journalism, one. Two, by having enough subscribers on my YouTube channel that I get a percentage automatically of advertisements from YouTube. So that gets me income. And by grants. So grants, subscriptions, memberships. I mean, I don't like asking the audience for money, but some people do come and give money. And so there's subscribers and members. There's doing things that are within my realm of interest but aren't hard news that people do want to, it could be a documentary or it could be producing a campaign for somebody. It could be the Women's Festival that I do. So strictly speaking, news doesn't sustain itself anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. No, news doesn't make money. And the object of news should not be to make money also. I'm actually quite comfortable with that. What I'm not comfortable with is people complaining non-stop about news but not willing to spend even the price of a cup of coffee in a month on a media organization or a media platform. That bothers me.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
My name is Mohammed Danish.
Hi.
So my question is with respect to the article that you wrote on Hindustan Times with respect to the Israel-Palestine,
With respect to?
the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Ah.
Yeah. So I'm audible, right? Yeah. So in the same article, you explained that Hamas, the terminology that you have used to indicate Hamas is a terror group, right? So my question is to largely understand your perspective on the resistance movements inside inside uh, inside spaces where an expansionist state entity is continually trying to overcome and occupy throughout the years. So in such a yeah, so in such a space, is that terminology very suitable? And if so, would we be still calling the anti-colonial, the anti-occupational movements that arise, including in India, like the INA, would we be calling them as terrorists? Thank you.
Okay. So I don't know which article you're citing, but it has to be from at least maybe a year plus ago, because it was at the time when the terror attack of 7th October, I'm still calling it that because that is the terminology I use, when the Hamas attack had happened on 7th of October, and I had gone to report immediately after that, and my position on Israel's handling since then has been quite critical. So you should also see subsequent writings. However, I do believe that it is possible, and that is my opinion, I do believe that it is possible to disagree with, criticize Israel without seeing the Hamas as a romanticized freedom movement. I don't see it as that because they killed women and children, and I saw that with my own eyes, the damage they had inflicted. I don't think the Indian National Army ever did that.
I'll go completely to the back. Two questions from the back, and then I'll come back. So, yeah, there, yeah, you. And then the second last row, the corner. Sandhya, can you see that? There, that lady there, yeah. Yeah.
Hi. So I just wanted to talk to you about, you talked about the tyranny of the algorithm. And I
Yes.
don't think a lot of people really understand how difficult it is to function according to an algorithm in big tech.
Yes.
So your primary platform being YouTube. Has also seen a lot of discourse on a lot of different content creators shifting from YouTube to more subscription-based models
Yes.
because of certain, very intricate things such as like the screen grabs that they choose for their videos. So what are some of those challenges, and do you see a future in a subscription-based model?
I mean, thank you for asking me that, because as I was walking up here, I had a phone call from my team in Delhi, and there was this one particular video which we think is very good, and nobody's watching it. And the whole debate was what should be. So the image that you put on a video is called a thumbnail. Okay. And so a lot of people now use these very dramatized AI images. They'll put some monsters and they'll put some fire burning. And I mean, it's some crazy thing. And we have, those are not our aesthetics. But at the same time, we realize that the tyranny of the algorithm means that we have to put something there that as you're scrolling on your phone, pops up and makes you stop. So that is such a true question, and we were like, no, this thumbnail doesn't work, try this. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, would I be debating what is this thumbnail? But this is the age we live in. Now, subscription-based model is a very interesting question, and I would love to actually move to it. But the one thing that makes me very uncomfortable, and I see colleagues doing it, and to each their own, I've seen colleagues who come on social media and they will say, we are short by X amount, please contribute, right? And people will. But usually they're very, very politically or ideologically oriented. So they're this side or that side, and they're very ideologically oriented. And because we've taken a very mindful position that we are going to be, we'll be modern in technology, but we'll be classic in our belief for what journalists should be. And I think it's possible to be that. I think there's an audience for it. I'm not very comfortable coming ahead and saying, okay, please, this is how much money I need this month, please give it. And I feel that subscription models tend to work better for platforms that are very polarized and polarizing. I could be wrong. It's something we haven't tried and it's something I should try. But the thumbnail nightmare is a total reality of my life now.
Okay. Hello.
Hi.
First of all, I can't believe it's really you. I'm so used to seeing you with short hair.
This grew in COVID and I never cut it.
You're not a hologram or robot, right?
Oh, yeah, sorry. No, this is not my AI avatar.
So here's the thing. I have a bachelor's degree in film, master's degree in journalism.
Yes.
I've made a documentary film on cyber censorship inspired by Edward Snowden's Citizen 4.
Yes.
So the documentary is about Article 66A. And I've interviewed Asim Trivedi, Gautam Bhatia, Rajiv Chandrasekhar and Parminder Singh, Jid of organization, Center for Internet.
Yes.
And about Article 66A, like I've heard of high school students posting things about MLAs getting arrested.
What's the question, sir?
No, so the fact is, what is the status of media freedom? Are we becoming like Russia, North Korea and China?
Okay, now, this big banner thing that you have just said is what would be called irresponsible reporting. We have real challenges with media freedom, but we are not Russia and North Korea. I just sat here and delivered a 1-hour, very candid conversation on what is wrong with the media, which shows that we are not Russia and North Korea. Because in Russia and North Korea, you wouldn't be even having this conversation, right? So let's start there. There is still a kind of complexity that we must bring to our conversations. What is it possible to do and what is it difficult to do? We must address both sides of that question. 66A was struck down, so I'm not sure.
Section 66A of the IT
was
Act.
struck down, right? So that's gone. Asim Trivedi is somebody I've interviewed a bunch of times. What happened with him was terrible. He faced criminal action for representing Parliament through the image, a cartoon of a toilet seat. And he went to jail for that. He came out. He suffered enormously. What happened to him should never have happened. 66A was struck down. So it doesn't apply. But no, we're not Russia and North Korea. We're still here having an argument, saying what we think.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi.
It's okay.
In your analysis of all the points you mentioned,
Yes.
I think you are very generous toward your own colleagues in media.
No, not at all.
For
Not at all.
when I talked, and you kind of blamed it squarely on external factors. When I talked to my dad specifically, he says that we have seen this movie before. In emergency, all media get co-opted with the institution. So it's usually the people who are basically flawed sometime. And I think you intentionally or unintentionally didn't touch upon it. The willful co-option of media with the
What do you think about the willful co-option?
I actually think
voluntary co-option
voluntary co-option, because the same thing happened in
my
emergency
whole-
also.
Thank you, we got the question.
My whole talk was about how I left television news. I think it's embarrassing. I wouldn't want to be part of it. So obviously I don't. How have I exempted my colleagues? I mean, they're not even my colleagues. I'm not even in the same space as them anymore. I haven't switched on a television news set for 7 years. Have you? Because if you have participated in that consumption of media. I don't watch it. I don't think it's good enough to watch. So I don't know how I'm exempting my colleagues.
Yeah. Shruti?
Hi, my name is Shruti. I just had a question with respect to the Constitution. So I wanted to understand, do you think that the guarantees that are there for the media currently are insufficient? And if yes, what would you think would be a better way to do this?
I mean, I just think that the Constitution is a document of good intentions that assumes that everybody is fair. Our Constitution is a great book, but I do feel that it comes from a place of benign energy. It assumes that there will be that everybody as a collective is always going to be interested in equality, justice, liberty and fraternity. And the moment that collapses, if you do not give the safeguards that are necessary to people and they're going to fear ending up in court for years, because the interpretation of the restrictions which I read out, they're so open-ended. Like, basically, I can give you real-life examples. So, I remember once doing a story on a rape in Hathras in Uttar Pradesh, right? A Dalit woman was raped and was killed. And I actually got like an FIR from the UP police saying that you have incited casteist tensions because you have mentioned the caste of the woman who was raped. And my argument was that her caste was the reason that she was raped. So this caste has to be mentioned, right? But the point is I had to send a lawyer to that police station to represent me. And this was me with hundreds of lawyer friends who will not charge me a paisa, with multiple cousins who are lawyers. I am saying now, imagine this is not me, this person of privilege. This is me in a smaller town with no resources. I will get penalized by that police. And it's because the language is incitement, public order. You are disturbing public order because you have mentioned the caste. You are inciting communities. This phrase, inciting communities, it's so open to interpretation. I don't find personally the language very ironclad. I think it was put in with the noblest of thoughts, but it came maybe from a simpler and more idealistic time.
Okay, we'll probably take two more questions. Yes, I think you have had your hand up. So first here and then you gentleman there in the...
Hi Barka,
Hi.
I'm Rishik, a fourth year
I'll come
law
to you.
student.
Hi.
So I just wanted to ask about the 2024 general elections.
Yes.
A lot of people, a lot of intellectuals say that it wasn't a fair ground, given the fact that not just the EVMs, but there were other issues pertaining to the Election Commission of India and their disclosure of information and the hate speech of the Prime Minister and selective targeting and before that the electoral bonds and such issues. So what's your opinion on that? Was it really an even game or your opinion on that?
There is a difference between a level playing field and whether an election is free and fair. An election can be completely free and fair, and I believe our elections to be fair and free in the sense of, if you ask me, are these elections rigged? My answer is no. If you ask me, is there a level playing field? No. All parties don't have the same money. All parties don't have the same access to media narratives. All parties don't have, so just in terms of resources, there's a disparity. But you have to remember that if today BJP is the behemoth, there was a time when Congress was the behemoth. This is politics. It's Darwinian. It's the survival of the fittest. It's not a level playing field. It's like asking me, is there a level playing field between women and men? No. But that doesn't equal. The absence of a level playing field cannot be conflated with this election was not fair. The election has been the election. People have voted and got the government they wanted. You can argue that people were influenced more effectively by the party that had more money. And so it's not a level playing field. I can have that argument. But I believe people have voted for the people I don't believe machines are rigged. I don't believe that. Or can be rigged.
Yes, sir.
So my question is is hypothetical but very specific.
Yes.
If you had just finished journalism as a student, would you still go and apply for a job to be a presenter on a mainstream TV channel?
No.
So we want to know why. And I was going to say, if you said yes, we'd want a reason for that too.
Because, sir, I became a journalist so that I could report from tough situations that other people didn't go to. I spent 15, 20 years of my life reporting from Kashmir when bombs would go off every day. I have reported from countless war zones. I have reported on riots and calamities. I don't particularly like sitting behind a table and being a presenter. Even in the heyday of TV, that's not what I loved about it. I loved being a reporter. Today, when I look at Indian TV news, I don't see anything that I respect or relate to, so I would never want to be a presenter on Indian TV today.
Hi Barka, this is Sham.
Hi.
Many of us started with Doordarshan,
Yes.
and after watching all those 400 channels, I'm back to Doordarshan at 9 p.m. news because it gives me, I was shocked. I was just scrolling through and I saw DD2
Yes.
at 9 p.m. and it gave me news all over the country, what is happening. because the other channels have become Congress versus BJP.
That's right.
Yeah?
I agree with you.
So, apart from, on YouTube I watch you, apart from you,
Yes.
do you see any channel that does good reporting or good news? Of course, you're doing good.
I mean, that's a very loaded question because if I said no, I would basically be sounding arrogant. But the answer is no. I literally do not consume, I don't consume any other organization's content. I do read some newspapers still online. I get them in hard copy, but I read them online. So I read the Indian Express. I read sometimes things in the Hindu. I write a column in the Hindustan Times, so I do read it occasionally. I very rarely look at the Times of India, but sometimes I'll flip pages. So I look at the newspapers. I do not consume any television at all except international news when there's a big story I'm interested in. And I do not consume any digital news content except my own. And I don't even watch my own. I practice my own, and then I watch murder mysteries.
Yeah.
Right.
Ma'am.
Good evening, Barkhaji.
Hi.
See the big difference, I mean, hello?
Yeah.
So while we've been decrying the polarization, how
Yes.
about celebrating the multipolarization? Because see the kind of media attention that Mr. Ratan Tata's device met, and what the attention that Mr. G.D. Birla and all didn't get. So we are getting a lot of news from, from business world, from the world of technology, sports, street foods of Varanasi, kind of videos and all that. So don't you think that has liberated us from talking about the government all the time?
It's not about the government. I mean, I'm not particularly a fan of talking politics all the time, but there are other issues in the world. There is the military, there's national security, there's geopolitics, there's the economy. So if politics bores you and you're free to find that boring, one still has to be an aware and engaged citizen of the world. And I have eaten from every chaat stall in Varanasi, but it's not enough to only know that. Of course. Also know that. I agree.
Yes, sir.
Neeraj here, Barkhaji.
Hi, Neeraj. Yeah.
Thank you, moderator, sir. After a
It's
few
all right,
minutes.
I'm just going.
Thank you so much.
See, she just made a comment about women, so I have to make sure that there are enough women who ask questions.
a very a quick question because you are extremely popular everywhere. I was following you on your just now trip to Pakistan.
Yes.
Our
Yes.
foreign minister was also there.
Yes.
And Mia Nawaz Sharif Saab ko you interviewed him,
Yes.
and Mariam also you interviewed,
Yes.
and you were extremely popular everywhere, and I was following you also. Fantastic. So how do you see our relations with them, the two countries, in coming years?
I mean, I don't see things getting better between India and Pakistan anytime soon at all. And I think I draw a distinction between the relationship between the two states, the state of Pakistan and the state of India, irrespective of who's the government there and who's the government here, and the people of Pakistan and the people of India. I think it is perfectly possible to have dear friendships across the border, even if you agree on nothing else. I have very close friends in Pakistan, and we argue all the time. And then sometimes we say, okay, now let's not argue, now we are not going to talk about this. We'll talk about the street foods of Lahore, right? Not Varanasi or Varanasi. So you have to find those common spaces to talk at an interpersonal level. At the level of state to state, there is an implosion in Pakistan right now. There are people on the street, they want Imran Khan out. Imran Khan is in jail. Pakistan has not been able to grow roots as a democracy because their military has not ever removed its stranglehold over the country. And Pakistan has evolved in a very different way from India. And because Pakistan is, as a state, not people, we can't generalize about people anywhere, but as a state, it believes that its only weapon against India is groups like the Lashkar, groups like the Jaish, and as long as that continues, I don't see things between India and Pakistan getting better anytime soon. Despite the fact that I have reported on it as a beat for maybe 30 years, and I have at least two very good, and I would say close friends across the border.
Barka, if I can
Yes.
ask you a question in the context of what we are doing with, the We the People series with the BIC. So you talked about, media, the need for, well, not media crawling as, or co-opted as, one of the audience members mentioned. What kind of media do we need for our democracy to, I won't say survive, but for our democracy to flourish? And I have a sort of a subsidiary question. How do new players come into the political space, electoral space, not political space, electoral space, if the media is not able to support new electoral entrants? And I suppose in a way, even media has the same problem. But because our interest in organizing this is to see what does it mean for our democracy, right? Because it's an important, forget about the fourth pillar, now it's almost like the main pillar, right, for people to vote, because whatever said and done, media influences or has some influence on how people vote, because that's where they get the information from. And we assume that people vote based on information they have, right? So where do you see this going?
I would first challenge that assumption. I think the world is showing you increasingly that the media and the way that we understand the world has increasingly limited impact on how people vote. I think this assumption in itself is a flawed one, and we've all had to learn it the hard way. If media impacted how people vote, Trump wouldn't have become the president of the United States of America. Because the media, most of the media, the established newspapers and networks, with the exception of Fox News and some individual podcast hosts on the right wing, they were all pro-Kamala Harris. But it did not. The media today sometimes gets clubbed by, especially people on the right of the spectrum, as being part of the elite. You're classified, rightly or wrongly, as the elite that is being sought to be displaced. So the media gets clubbed with that liberal elite, and in that echo chamber, the media also reads often the politics wrong. I think we have to challenge our assumption that what newspapers write in their editorials or television hosts say, or I think that's no longer what's influencing people. I think today social media is probably a bigger vehicle. I'm not saying this is good. Please understand, I'm not saying these are healthy developments. I'm just saying this is the reality. The power or the capacity of media to change or flip the outcome of an election, or to even read the election correctly, is severely limited. So one, let's start there. However, that doesn't change the fact that it is our duty to give equal space to people who are serious contenders in an electoral field. And the biggest story I can think of, which I think whose party was almost virtually birthed by media, was the Aam Aadmi Party. It is a party birthed by media. And some might argue not necessarily for very good reasons, because television channels at that point had become these kangaroo courts handing out certificates of who is guilty and innocent, and we had literally replaced courts of law, and Arvind Kejriwal rode that crest, and the Aam Aadmi Party was born. It was a completely television news fueled. India Against Corruption was a party created by media. But I think that was a different time. And I think today, the media will engage with anybody who seems to get them numbers. It's a very sad thing to say, but it's the truth. I'm not going to give you a theory that's untrue. So, there might be somebody who doesn't do well at the elections, but gets good views. They won't ignore him or her. So your question is a very big one. How do you bring back media into a functional pillar of democracy? Yeah. Right? I think we need some sort of, this is going to be contentious, we need some sort of regulation of social media. Because the media today is competing with social media. The legacy media is competing with social media Social media has no gatekeeping, no accountability. Nobody will take it to court. Nobody will hold it up to facts, though the law of the land does allow you to do it, but nobody does it. And standards are becoming lax in legacy newsrooms in the hurry to, oh, that video was on social media, let's just take it, it'll turn out to be wrong, it'll turn out to be old, that guy's not in trouble, but you're. And social media has no answerability, like nothing, none. And Europe has done it. There is regulation. There's regulation that you have to uphold privacy standards, you have to uphold all the same laws of the land, but they've had to do a special sort of set of rules that have some supervisory, influence on, and I should say, I don't mean government regulation. This is very important to clarify that I am totally against, and in fact, one of the big fights with the government last time between digital publishers and the government was their attempt to bring in a set of regulations that would have controlled companies like mine. And what they were trying to do, again speaking to tyrannies, was to say that, to be compliant with the law of the land, you have to have grievance officer, grievance redressal officer, you have to have so-and-so officer, you have to have so-and-so officer. So basically it meant that small organizations that didn't have a lot of resources would then get caught in this maze of kind of bureaucratic asks from the government of the day, and it was just a way of closing you. Another policy that has made digital media, for example, less robust is the rule that forbids foreign direct investment to come into digital media. And earlier, you were allowed to take foreign investments. Now you need approval from the government of the day, which you don't get. Now, guess what? Guess who's lobbying for this not to happen? A lot of Indian media organizations don't want foreign investment, don't want digital space to grow, because it's a threat to them. And so they will canvass with the powers that be and say, don't allow this, and it's not allowed. So we have to understand in a very granular way that if you want media to be free, everything impacts it, from policy on investment to regulatory environment. So when I said regulation, I didn't mean government. I meant in an ideal world, there should be what we had to do in television. We did it after 26/11, we're actually on 26/11. When all of us were caught unawares by the terror attack in Mumbai, we're actually on that very day, the anniversary of that day today, and we realized that there were no systems in place for how media should respond when your country is under attack. And so we formed a self-regulatory industry body, and we agreed on norms. This is what we'll do, this is what we won't do. If there's confusion, we'll confer amongst ourselves. So I think there is some attempt to mobilize digital publishers in the same way. So all I'm saying is, but social media is not digital publishers. Social media is some person on Instagram saying, I don't know,
I believe we are all Martians, for example.
No, I'll give you a real example that happened to me. It's actually a funny example, but it could be so dangerous. It's a real example. I remember once I went to cover the Delhi election, and Arvind Kejriwal had just won the election. I was trying to get an interview. So I had to push my way through this crowd. I finally reached him. He said, it's too crowded to do an interview. I said, 2 questions on the phone, 2 questions on the phone. So I was holding my phone like this, and I took 2 questions. I took a photograph. I came back. I filed my report. I was very happy. Story over. That image got photoshopped into the phone being converted into a stack of cash. And then that photograph was made viral, and it was made so viral that somebody forwarded it to me. So then I posted it on Twitter saying that, ha ha ha, because I had the original. So I put the original and the Photoshop image. But my point is, suppose I was not well known, and somebody put a thing saying, so-and-so person has taken this money. Just anybody, or that we are all Martians. There is literally nothing to stop people from talking this garbage. You can just say anything, and the only thing that comes within the gambit of regulation right now are media publishers. But media is ending up competing with social media, which is like the Wild West. You can literally say anything, put up any video, do anything, reveal a rape survivor's name, abuse somebody, threaten somebody. There'll be nothing, because it's not a media organization.
So it's just, in a way, gossip
It's
or
worse than gossip. It's not
opinion
even like so-and-so
opinion
had
sharing?
No, that's all very benign. It's active fake news, it's active incitement to violence, it's active threats, it's active defamation, it's lies, but it's just sometimes a bot, sometimes a fake name. You don't even know who's at the keyboard. It's a very seriously vitiated for all the good things that come with social media, and many good things that we all use it or try and use it to our advantage to amplify our work. It can't be this space which is under which there is no intervention from the law of the land. But that takes us back to the old debate. It's so complicated to get intervention from the law of the land.
Yeah.
So most people
We'll-
say, let it go.
So, in terms of big media, I think
Yes.
the concern is if it's purely commercial interests owning big media,
Yes.
then there are other issues. So you're looking basically for a benign philanthropist to support big media. That seemed to be one thought process, which is necessarily not
It's
worked.
not going to happen.
Which is necessarily not worked, except, I don't know, is
It's
it
worked nowhere.
nowhere? I mean,
It's worked
even the
nowhere.
Guardian, I don't think
Guardian is now asking people to donate.
people to donate. So
That's why I was telling this gentleman, I'm not against business getting into media. Business is in media everywhere in the world. It's just that certain cultures, like in America, where I write for the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, who owns it, he cannot tell the editor what to publish.
and
right?
we all saw what happened, in the
But
recent
he did
elections.
intervene and said we won't endorse a candidate,
Yeah.
right? However, largely that paper was able to publish criticism of their owner. Washington Post published articles criticizing Bezos for not endorsing Harris or anybody. Here, can you even imagine criticizing the owner of where you work? It's a different culture. We have to recognize that we are in a different culture.
Okay, so now you should move away from big media to individual,
Yeah, independent media.
independent media, say regional media, regional languages, small stringers. How do you sort of encourage them? Last question of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very important question, so I want to be thoughtful and mindful in answering it. I think, I wish I could say that we need a public service broadcaster, but that experiment is crumbling in the United Kingdom. The BBC, you're mandated if you have a TV to pay for a BBC license, and that's how BBC actually gets its funds. But people are now lying in forms or maybe even telling the truth and saying we don't have a TV and just deregistering themselves. So I don't think you can force anybody to watch you, right? And that is why, while it looks like it's a cop-out when I say the answer has to come partially from the law, but it has to come in the end from the people who watch us and read us. If we are accepted, I use the word we in a very loose way right now. If all these things, bias, vitriol, hate-mongering, sensationalism, fake news, is acceptable, and I don't trust any government to regulate media, but we are not rejected by communities. Why is this kind of media not being rejected? It's because we've all come to believe, there's so much garbage in the internet, this is one more thing, move on, swipe to the next thing. It's the culture of how we consume content. And I'm afraid that unless we pause to consider what's at stake, every time we lend a click or an eyeball to something we actually don't respect. I'm not asking you to not watch something that you like, but at least don't give respectability to those that you have an adverse opinion on. Because what else is the answer? What else is the answer? For more corporates to back independent media, it would be the same thing. We just said, business houses are a bad idea. I don't think they're a bad idea, by the way. I think the bad idea is because
The extent of control or
it's the extent of control. There are no walls over. There's no walls over who will take the final call. If there were those walls, NBC has been owned by General Electric for decades. You look around anywhere in the world, business owns media. It's just that because of the Americans have the First Amendment, because media freedom is a big part of their culture. And that's why I started with the fact that our constitution doesn't even have a thing called the freedom of the press. It is not ingrained in our culture. Free speech is such a compromised entity in our culture. Books have been banned, movies have been banned. We have to recognize that we are dealing, till we change the culture of consumption or the way we think about content, I don't see any easy fix answers.
Okay, on that note, which gives us a lot of food for thought in a cliched manner,
Right.
we will stop because we have come to the end, and BIC normally kicks us out at the exact time.
good, they run
So
on
we'll
time.
stop. Rohit?
Thank you very much. Thank you.